Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. What a week in politics it's been, and what a year it's going to be to find out what happened in Wisconsin and what's going to happen here in Colorado. Two of the best. Let's start over here. Wayne Laugesen from the Colorado Springs Gazette. Glad to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And congratulations on keeping a job in the newspaper world. It's,
Barely. It's just kind of a day-to-day thing, you know.
When are newspapers finally going to just change their title to newsletters? I think.
We are a media organization, John.
Right. There we go.
Have TV shows now, and we're all digital and everything.
Yeah. That revenue just keeps coming on in.
That's right.
Speaking of revenue coming on in, public and political consultant extraordinaire, Floyd Ciruli. Good to see you.
It's good to be here. It's a fun year.
It is a fun year. All right, let's jump into this. Tuesday was the Walker race, and I was watching that like a hawk. And there was a real difference in I look at Ohio and then Wisconsin. They both tried the same sort of personnel reforms. It fell on its face in Ohio. In Wisconsin, it worked largely because there was an infrastructure there of political activists on the right who were willing to do some things. But how big was this victory? In my mind, this was a mammoth victory, particularly when we're talking about the unions. I think this shows the high tide of public sector unions, and I don't think they're going to get any higher.
I think I'm going to agree with you on that. I thought that it got people's attention to the public sector unions, which I think they didn't totally understand. As you know, at the same time, two California cities of substance, San Diego and San Jose, both passed some pension reforms, which were strongly opposed by the unions. And of course, California is the state probably maybe in the most danger in general in terms of pensions, but also the most liberal state in the union in terms of given its size. So that was, I think, a good indication. I think this could roll out of here and be very, very, I agree with you, very, very significant.
Do you think that average voting citizens are starting to get an idea of the financial consequences of these lavish benefits packages that government workers have? You know, for so long, teachers especially, they never got paid, but now you start to look at their full benefits package. In Wisconsin, they paid nothing for their insurance, no match at all. They didn't have to put in a match for their retirement, and the retirement benefits were budget busting. Are we getting that?
Yes, but primarily because I think the unions sort of completely misjudged that. As you know, they thought they could sort of distract people from that, talk about collective bargaining rights, the end of democracy, many of the things you've heard, and it was quite clear from the exit polling and also just watching the election and the messaging in that election that people really got the fact that they felt that the union workers were not working any harder than they were, and yet they didn't have to pay for health care. They had a very excessively generous pension and hence it didn't look like it was just a sort of revenge against the unions or an anti-union movement. It really looked like it was addressing that, and it put it on a national stage. So I now think the possibility of that spreading nationally has a much better chance than it did. But I would add it was also a very bad day for the Democratic Party because they really invested in it and they showed their linkage to the union movement, the public union movement, and it was also a bad day for Obama. Because while I wouldn't predict he'll lose Wisconsin, I do think his not showing up angered Democrats and union members.
What do you mean he didn't show up? He put a tweet out. One tweet by the president is worth 50,000 in personal endorsements. How big was this?
Oh, I think it's psychological devastation for the left in many ways. End of democracy. This was the last stand of democracy. We heard them crying about it in Wisconsin. They're crying about it everywhere. But the fact of the matter is, I think that 9 and 10% unemployment sustained for several years starts getting people looking at public employee wages and benefits. Even Colorado Springs, big government town.
People don't think of it as a big government town. People think Colorado Springs is not a big government town. It's the town that the Taxpayer Bill of Rights and Douglas Bruce has destroyed because you stop watering the trees and cutting them down to save money.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, there are kind of two sides to Colorado Springs. The fact of the matter is, there's an enormous military presence there. A lot of military retirees, so there's a lot of government checks coming into Colorado Springs. But we have had a local government that was just out of control for years as far as employee pay and benefits goes. We have city employees who only recently no longer receive 100% of their pay if they're on disability. Can you imagine that? That's not taxed. you get a raise if you go on disability
Really?
in Colorado Springs.
Hot
Just until recently.
Damn, that is cool.
I think the state pays
wait.
63, 64%.
You're telling me
like
I break my toe, I can't go to work, and I can get 100% of what I make and not have to pay any income tax.
Exactly. That's the way it has been in Colorado Springs for decades, until just recently we started tapering it back. So I think we're seeing this all over the country, and Wisconsin was just a great example of the private sector waking up to what's really going on.
How did it happen in Wisconsin? When you think about Wisconsin was the home. I mean, the first state to unionize employees was Wisconsin. I mean, they got great beer halls, but they're all unionized. I mean, how could this happen? And of all places, Wisconsin.
In a way, it is. I mean, you can always go back to what is the first cause, but to some extent, it was the 2010 election which brought in Governor Walker. And keep in mind that was caused by Obamacare to a large extent, and the start of the Tea Party movement, including in Wisconsin. His, I think, boldness, his refusal to be, as you know, he's been doing this for more than a year. He started this last, I think, March in 11. Unbelievable courage to hang on there, because this is not the only recall. There were recalls of the state Senate. There was a battle over a Supreme Court justice. It has been nonstop. I would say the main thing out of Wisconsin, besides a tremendous loss for unions and I think Democrats, is exhaustion. But you can't say that those people did not know the issues, came out in not presidential level numbers, but close to it, more than 2 million people, to express their will. And as opposed to what the exit polls sort of mispositioned this thing in the news the next morning, it was a big victory. I mean, when you got 6 or 7 points, that is a tremendous message.
What did Walker say the next day? It's now safe to turn on your television sets again in Wisconsin.
Can you imagine? It's been an unbelievable year.
And it was so ugly, so personal, and so much money on both sides. But
you'll notice the Democrats stopped talking about anything related to collective bargaining to any great extent. They went on the attack against Walker on peripheral kinds of issues because they knew they weren't winning the core issue. The polls showed that repeatedly people said, I'm not very worried about collective bargaining rights. You should pay more. I'm not paying, or I'm being forced to pay more.
Was it Walker had a love child? When you have a love child, you know you're in trouble. You know. But let's bring it to Colorado because I think 2 things this month are going to be watershed. What happened in Wisconsin and what's going to happen in a few weeks when it comes to the Obamacare decision, which could come out pretty much any time towards the end of this month. What does that mean for Colorado? I mean, let's get real. This is the must-win state for Obama. Almost everyone agrees that the road to the White House goes through Colorado. This is going to be the swing state, and it could be what Florida was back in 2012, which is exciting. And I got to tell you,
pregnant Chad, hanging Chad, all that.
Yeah, you know, and I don't even know Chad, but. You know, that scares me because my team is not so good when it comes to getting these things done. Right. What does it all mean?
Well, if it comes down to Florida, we're in bad shape. You know, if you're talking about a debacle like that where you can't figure out Colorado because the Democratic establishment will determine the outcome of that and they control Colorado in general. No, I think Colorado is just huge to this election. That's why we've seen so much of Obama. We'll see a lot more of him. He was very fortunate in that on the rotation this year for his military academy graduation speeches was the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, and he gave a very hawkish, pro-military speech there. I was surprised at the sort of tepid response of the audience, but he was clearly giving a campaign speech. And I've been told by the White House and by his campaign out of Illinois that he's going to be in Colorado a lot. And
he should just buy a condominium. I mean, it's better than staying at the Hyatt at this point. He's going to be here that often.
Well, and the thing, you know, the White House has asked for guest column space on the Gazette's editorial page to place an article of President Obama's. And just last week, MSNBC came out with a report on the top media markets that the Obama campaign and anti-Obama campaign organizations are advertising in. Number 4 in the country is El Paso County and Colorado Springs per capita. Yes.
And the Gazette is quite pleased.
Oh, yeah.
Gazette, there's only going to be one. But no, notice the Freudian slip that Wayne pulled out here. He said all the ads that are going to come out on the Obama campaign and the anti-Obama campaign.
Well, no, that's true. They measured organizations that are putting a lot of money into defeating Obama. There were about 4 of them. and the Obama campaign itself, and where they're spending their money. And
But notice,
if you live in Colorado Springs, there are only 3 locations where they're spending more money trying to get your attention.
you know, isn't it amazing though? You said anti-Obama and Obama. I would think it'd be Obama and Romney, but Romney still has a hard time getting some traction. You told me before the show, if the election were held today here in Colorado, that Obama would likely win. That's your professional
There's
opinion.
at least 3 polls in the last month that said that at various degrees. One of them had it tied, but by and large it was a point or between a point and 4 points. And, you know, it sort of makes sense. We tend to track the national level or the national polling because we're very balanced in terms of our core groups between the Democrats and Republicans. You can see it both in registration numbers, but also in the last couple of elections. And then the swing vote sort of decides. The unaffiliated, the woman that makes up her decision quite late, Republicans that are not very partisan and not committed to their party one way or the other. Those will be the people that are sort of targeted toward the end. But at the moment, Obama's up barely. One question I have for Colorado Springs is when we start cutting $50 billion out of the defense budget, does Obama get blamed, or does, I take it, he tries to blame the Republicans for not dealing with the fiscal cliff? Because that's kind of the dialogue in Washington right now, is that there's going to be this huge defense cut.
Right. That's what we've been fearing a lot. There's a lot of concern about that in Colorado Springs right now with the many military bases that we have there. And yeah, I don't know who gets the blame for that, but I would think that with Obama in office right now, if the cuts come between now and November, and people start feeling them, that Obama gets the blame. So I would, I really don't know. But I have to ask you, Floyd, you're better with the numbers than either of us are on this. If it's close right now in Colorado, does that not bode well for Romney? It seems like Obama would have quite a head start, having spent as much time as he has here of late, and the fact that Romney really hasn't started much of a campaign yet.
I think
go ahead,
jump in.
I don't see the Romney infrastructure here yet. I mean, I've seen the president opening up a second campaign office. I'm hearing talk about how they're hiring people to register Hispanic voters. I'm hearing all sorts of things. They know what they're doing. They're buying ad space. I don't see, and maybe I'm just not in a position to see it, I don't see the same amount of activity from Romney. Am I wrong?
But we know the Republicans can do it because to some extent you saw it in Wisconsin. So if they apply that kind of infrastructure here, I think they could do it. But I think the point that you're making is that Obama is the incumbent president, and it's clear that he is right on the cusp of winning or losing this. His approval rating is well below 50%. The head-to-heads are within 2 points nationally. In most of these toss-up states, it's just barely a few points. I mean, you look at Florida, Romney's ahead. Ohio, he's behind. He's behind in Virginia. But I mean, it's really, it's very, very close right now. And that, for me, that goes to your point, and that is that if things break right for Romney, that is to say, the economy stays troubled and people are anxious about it. The one thing that does work for Obama is national security. Between the surge in Afghanistan and drone wars and getting Osama bin Laden, he really has sort of, I wouldn't say completely inoculated himself, because obviously he gets criticized by the right, but nonetheless, he has sort of managed to position himself fairly well there.
Yeah, but that's not an issue any longer, is it? Right now,
I agree.
People who don't have jobs don't care about Iraq.
Well, that's true. But, look, we defeated one sitting Democrat, as I understand it, in the last 100 years, has been defeated and not received a second term, and that's Carter. And his foreign policy record was a disaster. I mean, he had the Iran hostage crisis, the bungled rescue attempt. That's off of Obama's plate, and that was a big part of that defeat of Jimmy Carter in '76.
But I'd argue that wasn't. It was record high inflation, stagflation, high unemployment, 20% mortgage rates. You remember that stuff. I mean, Americans, they need a job first and foremost, and I'm amazed that there isn't more pushback against the Obama budgets, the stimulus package that didn't work, the constant spending, money going to places like Abound Solar that then lay off 70% of their workforce here in Colorado. What is it about Romney that hasn't quite stuck yet here in Colorado?
Well, I would say that up until about April, he was being beaten pretty vigorously by his own party with super PACs and lots of ads. The amazing thing is, though, that given the votes that Santorum got and Gingrich and Paul, that these head-to-head polls right now indicate that no one's going much to an alternative. They're in 5% of the votes out there that are even looking at an alternative or going to don't know. It is very, very close right now, and Romney has consolidated. When they're given a choice, Obama or anti-Obama, that is to say, Obama or Romney. And Romney doesn't care, frankly, whether they're in love with him or like all of his policies. The one reason why I think he is in reasonably good shape right at the moment is that Obama's campaign has thrown some of their best arguments against them. The anti-Bain argument, Bain Capital, the anti-Massachusetts governor argument. Most recently, they've been attacking the Republicans in Congress as obstinate, which they do all the time, but they've stepped it up a great deal. And yet, he's still only 2 points ahead. And Romney's favorabilities aren't much below, or they're at or above Obama's.
I think Romney has one subtle thing that's going to work for him here. I believe there will be a whisper campaign about his religion. I don't think people understand Mormonism. I don't, and I think people feel uncomfortable with it. I think in a lot of states, Mormonism is that like Scientology? What is this? Colorado being so close to Utah, I don't know anybody in Colorado who doesn't have a Mormon neighbor or a Mormon friend, and I would imagine that part is not going to bother Coloradans as much as it might bother Floridians.
Yeah, I don't think it weighs as heavily in the swing states as it does in the Republican safe zones. So he was more vulnerable to that.
Pretty
I
interesting,
think,
isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, you're not going to lose Texas, because Romney is a Mormon.
Although there are some hardcore religious conservatives that called my show and say, it's a cult. Mormonism is a cult. I would rather have a Muslim than a Mormon, and that's their thinking.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I know that there are a lot of people who have big hang-ups with it, but it is my impression that he survived that in the primary, that he got the nomination despite that, and that was where it was going to be his biggest problem, was against the other Republican contenders. I look correct me if I'm wrong on that.
We're in new territory to some extent, but it's if Kennedy was a Catholic, and a lot of people thought that was a cult.
Sure.
It is. It is. As a recovering Catholic myself, let me tell you,
I'm a recovering Catholic.
Are you kidding? You know how much constructive surgery I had to have done on my earlobe from Sister Silveria yanking on it during class all the time? But I look at the media coverage. Obama comes in, he goes to my alma mater and has a beer over at the sink, and everybody's all over him. They're throwing rose petals. He gets incredible media coverage. Romney goes up to, I think it was Weld County or someplace.
Fort Morgan. Fort Lupton.
Right. And there he is saying we need energy independence, this great scenic backdrop. And I think there was a blog that picked it up and ran a picture of it. That's it.
I believe that was the day where it was right at that moment that Obama announced that he was for gay marriages. It completely sort of ate the news here. Plus, we were at the end of the legislative session, which, as you know, was a little confusing. But he is pushing a theme, which I do think is a good theme for him in Colorado. And as you know, he then went out to Craig and talked about coal production, and that is that jobs in this state are very much linked to energy production, and that's also linked to the cost of energy. And those, in my view, are one of Obama's vulnerabilities when he came out against the pipeline. The sort of the exposure that green energy really is pretty thin in terms of the amount of money we're putting into it and the subsidies compared to right now the possibility of energy independence based on hydrocarbons. So I think he's working a big theme there. But you're right. He hasn't really been to the metro area. Romney, he hasn't come here and really worked this yet.
No, he really hasn't. And knowing it's a swing, I'm still curious why people don't like him. I just get a sense. What was the Time magazine cover? Why don't they like me? There's and now we've got a clear cut. It's this one or it's that one. You say if it was held today, Obama wins. I tend to agree with that. What does Romney have to do?
Well, I just think Romney needs to. He needs to guarantee the base that he's a real Republican, that he's a strong alternative to Obama, but mostly he needs to win over the independents. Obviously, I mean he needs to assure them that their life will get better if he's elected president.
It's a tough walk because on one side, he has to get the base to come out and vote for him, and a lot of the hardcore Republican base see him kind of like John McCain. They see what he did with health care in Massachusetts. They see him as a moderate.
Right.
So he has to placate them to get them out. At the same time, he has to get particularly unaffiliated women to come out and vote for him, and those are two different demographics.
Well, look at Colorado, for instance. I mean, the conservative base is El Paso County, most populous county in the state. And Eli Bremer, the chairman of the Republican Party in El Paso County, told me, this was 6 months ago, or maybe almost a year ago, he said that the Republican nominee in Colorado to win Colorado is going to have to get about 64% support in El Paso County. Do you know if that's accurate? Floyd, is that something you've heard?
You know, I haven't seen that particular number, but it definitely makes sense, because in the Denver metro area, which is a little over half the vote, the Democrat typically has to get well over 55, closer to 60% to make up for El Paso County, Weld County, the Western Slope, and so that certainly makes sense. I mean, there's no doubt. And didn't your county go for Santorum at the caucus level?
Yes.
And so to some extent, I think the reason why he went to Weld County is to work on his base. I think he knows that, sort of understands that.
So he's going to have to get into Colorado and other swing states and really secure that base so that he can carry the swing states, because these really are swing states. I mean, they're really very close. And
the final deciders are what you mentioned, that these swing voters, these unaffiliated voters. We're going to have a debate here on October the 3rd. Now, it looks like, at least watching Romney in the primary debates, he holds his own. He did well in Florida. I mean, there were some times when he was off his game, when he was talking about his taxes and what have you, but nonetheless, most of the time he was professional and sometimes actually exceptional. So assuming he holds his own, I think he's going to be harder to characterize as extreme. And as you know, that's been the Democratic model, is that take that Republican candidate and cite something on abortion, cite something on gay rights, cite something that scares the sort of the moderate voter who doesn't like to discuss social issues. Also, I think that's going to be harder for him.
The attack on Bain, the attack on being a vulture capitalist, the attack on, look at what Romney's done. He's put people out of work. When Todd Shepard did the research for Complete Colorado and found out that Obama's national chairman, Federico Pena, is one of those nasty venture capitalists who shut down at least 3 manufacturing plants and fired over 1,000 people. It's a little hard for Obama to be throwing those bombs at people who have saved businesses by cutting the waste and reorganizing them, when his own supporters do that as well.
In particular, when Bill Clinton and Mayor Booker come out and say that it's either sort of disgusting strategy or inaccurate, and that was the gist of Clinton's argument, that he is a sterling, exceptional business person, and his record in Massachusetts as a governor was, satisfactory. I mean, it sort of undermined, because there are 2 core arguments there. That is, Romney simply is not the kind of person you want to turn the country over to. He is not going to be treating you fairly. And secondly, that it's not really about the growth in the economy. It's about how we're distributing everything. And if those 2 things are undermined, then the Republicans, or pardon me, the Democrats at the moment don't have an argument, because that's the basic argument.
We've only got a few minutes left, so let me dive in. What makes Colorado unique? In that every state has its own personality. Every state, has its own hot button issues, its own characters, its own celebrities. What is it about Colorado? If you were to lean over to Romney or Obama and say, you want to win Colorado, you need to do this. What is this? What's different?
I think Colorado's unique in that it's a very transient state. People come here from other places. They come here not necessarily for a job, but for a lifestyle. They want to come here and they want to be free, and they want to live as, the former mayor of Boulder, Paul Danish, always told me part of the problem with the sort of density housing that they always wanted to develop in Boulder was that people don't move here from the East Coast and the West Coast so that they can live in some little, in some little condo, where they're squished in with several hundred other people. So they always had that going against them in trying to plan Boulder. So I think that each candidate in Colorado is going to have to tell the people that your life will go on as it has. We'll leave you alone. We'll keep the government out of your life. That's a little more difficult for the Democrat than it is for the Republican.
What's different here?
You know, I think we have become very, very special in the last decade because we were dependably Republican in our presidential politics, you know, in the modern era. And we began to switch, I think, because of the growth of people who weren't geared to the tradition here, weren't linked up with either the Republican Party or even the Democratic Party. They became these unaffiliated to a large extent, or they became very weak partisans. And so that we are now, while we have these bases that have ideological underpinnings, let's face it, there are some very, very left Democrats here and some very, very right Republicans. What we mostly have, which is unique, is this group of voters that will swing in both directions. To some extent based on the best arguments and the best candidates, to sometimes just to the best advertisements. They can sometimes be totally irrational or tricked by good campaigns.
I'm always amazed in Colorado.
But they do move.
The split ticket that will vote for the Republican president and the Democratic governor, will vote for the Republican governor but the Democratic House.
And we've been doing that really since I've been watching it in the 70s and 80s, Dick Lamb and Bill Armstrong. So we've been doing that for a very long period of time. And that makes us unique.
It comes down to a popularity contest. I mean, a lot of Coloradans, I think, just want to like that person.
I think that's absolutely true. Having a good smile helps a lot, but I also think it makes the campaigns here very competitive.
Floyd, thank you so much. Always great having you. Wayne, thanks for hauling all the way up from Boulder. And look at this smile. Who wouldn't trust this smile? Hey, tell a friend about the Independence Institute. That's independenceinstitute.org. Listen for me on KHOW Radio. Tell a friend. We'll see you soon.